The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there, welcome to the show. This one is brought to you with West Yorkshire Electrical. We're here with Rocco Dean from Leeds That. So we're crossing the streams fully on Ghostbusters today. We'll see how that one works out. Now you get to see how we reach the pinnacle of the podcasting mountain when Michael delivers his read for West Yorkshire Electrical.
It's not a read as such, is it? It's just a
vibe.
It's just a I do it on instinct and also on a vague memory of what electrical services they offer.
Go on then.
Renewables. You're looking at solar panels, battery storage for the solar panels. That's good.
If you've got a car, where'd you put it?
Charge it. Well, it depends. If it's a petrol one, you can just put it on the driver.
Yeah.
But if it's an electric car, you can plug that in at home using one of the electrical chargers.
So you picked up on my prompt there. Well done. Well
done. But they also do like testing and that. Fire alarms,
fully
lights.
accredited.
Need I go on?
Probably,
CCTV. There you go. That's something else to do.
wyelectrical.co.uk for details. Right, we're here to talk about your book. We've got the book there. It's on the table, isn't it? It's The Sons of Revie, and it's a decade of dominance, Leeds United's decade of dominance. So welcome to the inner sanctum.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We had to obviously sanitize you on the way in.
Yep.
Pass you through the Chernobyl style. No, it's not like Chernobyl, is it, in here?
Not normally.
No.
It's an altogether more toxic environment. We're recording obviously after the
it was on Friday, wasn't
the
it?
QPR game.
Well, we can talk about that, can't we? Actually, in the context of like Revie and how we all feel about the old stuff versus the new stuff. Yeah, so we recorded on Friday. We did the match ball for QPR. This is the first time we've set foot in here since then, since the bad thing happened. Not so much fun, that was it?
There's another bad thing to come this weekend, isn't there? So let's get used to it, is what I say. But this is like a little break to talk about some. Well, we can't get away from the present, can we? Probably, but
no.
This is a little break to talk about better times.
Yes. So the Revie era, you've written a book on top of all the other books that you've done, which we've got on the table as well. The O'Leary one, the League One Leeds one. So this one is written through the eyes of your dad.
Yeah,
which I like. Because you are obviously a far too sprightly gentleman to have written it yourself. So, how did you go about that? Was it just a case of sitting down with your dad and like saying, "Right, tell me all about it"?
Sort of, yeah, but a bit more modern in terms of doing it over email. So yeah, I started. So he was 13 in 1964 when the book basically starts. So he'd started going to Ellen Road in Revie's first season. So the timing's obviously perfect. So yeah, I sort of made a short list of about 10 games per season that looked like the biggest main games. And he basically told me everything he remembers from those games and, you know, talking about the players and his memories and thoughts and opinions on them. And yeah, the odd story about, you know, what it was like at Ellen Road in those days, attendances and, you know, the pre-match, processes and traditions and things like that ended up, just basically being the form, the basis of the book. But it's funny as well because Match of the Day actually started in that 1964-65 season. So the first season of the book. So there is some footage, but it's like terrible. But then as you go on through the years, the footage on YouTube gets a lot better. You can start watching full games and stuff. So as you get later on in the book, I suppose, like more of my own opinions come into it. I sort of started feeling like a fan from abroad might feel watching games now. You know, I was following it all the way through and almost became like emotionally attached to it as well. So, you know, like losing the FA Cup final in 1970, I felt absolutely distraught for them, you know, watching that replay, like how they lost that, I don't know. So yeah, towards the end, it's sort of more of my own emotions and throughout the book, sort of thinking how I would have felt as well. And yeah, putting my own sort of slant on it. But yeah, like invaluable having my dad's memories there especially in the earliest years.
Because we are all a generation down from that. And I wonder, does your dad still go then?
Yeah, he does, yeah.
Do you find, and I know this is the case with my dad, that like it informs just about all of his thinking, I think, even on a really like subconscious level, because they basically saw what was the best team in the world at that time. And it's kind of ruined everything since. I suppose there's kind of, you can see a little bit of a carryover from that with the way that we all kind of think about Bielsa, that we saw this football, and then we just want it to be the same again forever, or the successful bits anyway.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think my dad's probably a bit different. He's like very positive. He gets carried away very easily. So yeah, probably not as much for him. But I mean, that's the thing about Leeds, isn't it? It's in our blood. We've all grown up on these stories about Leeds literally being the best team in the world. And it's probably why we drag down all the teams that we watch, because we're expecting them to not to hit the heights exactly, but it's just there in the back of our minds, isn't it? We're Leeds United, like we should be better than this, should not be losing 4-0 to QPR.
And it's funny how I think the way that we view footballers now, and if you see like how kids play FIFA and consume football, and it's all about icons and stars and stats and stuff like that, and you contrast it with 2 generations back when these people are, I mean, I view these people as like rock stars. I think I once described like the Revie side in my mind was a little bit like it's the book about all the space race Americans. It's the right stuff, isn't it? And so it feels like they sort of lionized that Revie team as being like all the guys, sort of John Glenn era people who basically strapped themselves onto rockets and did mad shit in the pursuit of something incredible and took the world into space. And that they were put on such a pedestal. And I feel that same way about the Revie side, the way that my dad sort of talked to me about it. And yet they were all dead down to earth and so relatable. And you look at the way that kind of Eddie Gray is there as a man of the people now, and Norman Hunter was the same as well, just being at Ellen Road, and they felt so approachable, and you could just relate to it all. Whereas I think there's a real arm's length quality about football these days. So it's not just that the times have changed. I think that the stars have changed as well, and it was so much more relatable back then.
Yeah, definitely. And, something I wish I'd have been able to experience myself. So, growing up in the early 90s is when I started supporting Leeds. And even then, I suppose, my first season ticket was the first Premier League season. So, pretty much straight away, football became a whole different thing. And they're like players are into superstardom. But yeah, back in the day, they all used to just go to the pub in between games, or you'd see them in the cracked egg over the road, having a sandwich, playing cards or whatever.
No, they lived on Beeston Hill and stuff, didn't they?
So, completely different world.
I think I find the timing of this team versus my first attendance at Leeds weird, because it's basically this is 20 years before I started going to Leeds games. But 20 years ago from now wasn't that long ago.
No.
It all seems far too recent.
It's confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, because it was still a crossover. Like in the same way as I would still talk about the Leeds team of 20 years ago now. I remember hearing people talk about this team and thinking it was absolute ancient history at the time to me as a kid. Because I was I think probably.
But when you're 10, 20 years is twice your life. You're like, bloody hell, it's forever.
But it was a lot of it was in black and white, and it was like, well, this is obviously ancient. This stuff? It's got basically no kind of link to George Graham, Howard Wilkinson, the sort of era I was growing up in. But actually, it's not a huge journey from that to when I started supporting Leeds, but it just felt like that at the time.
I suspect technology's kind of masked it a little bit, hasn't it? Like the improvement in TV pictures, because, I mean, although that said, if Sky Sports happened to show a clip of like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you go, look at it. Like it's a square picture and it used to be on pre-high definition televisions and it's been sort of copied from their archives or whatever. And you go, that looks old, but it's still something you remember and you lived through, and it's in colour, so you kind of recognise it as a thing that was back then.
And you still get to see, Tony Yeboah scoring a goal from 2 or 3 different angles, whereas a lot of Leeds footage of this, there isn't any footage of an awful lot of it, and then you get a brilliant goal score where Peter Lorimer smacking one in from 30 yards, but you see one angle of it, and Eddie Gray dancing around people is one camera view.
Yeah, so how much of it have you sort of balanced between your dad's anecdotes and stuff you've been able to find?
I think, at the beginning, it's, more heavily on my dad's side. And then, it just gets probably less and less as you get along. And I think, towards like probably the second half of the book is probably mostly my stuff with, like the odd anecdote or things from my dad thrown in there to, get that authentic flavour still. But a lot of it is, my thoughts and opinions on it all. In
terms of like your thoughts and opinions on it all, I think you said to me one of the things you'd noticed is that like how young that squad was back at the start. Obviously, ages over time, revelation, boys and girls. But back at the start, it was a very young team, family even, that evolved over time with Revie until the point that he left.
Yeah, that's the thing. It blows my mind really. So like when we won the Fairs Cup 1968, we did that with 10 players under the age of 23, and 9 of them had cost nothing. They'd all come through the youth team. I mean, just unbelievable. It's like a dream come true. You know, I don't know if it's because of the Revie team, but like a bit geeky, but like on Football Manager, like my dream is always to try and build a team of kids and like, you know, just sort of do 10 years with them and see what they achieve. I don't know if that's just me or just Leeds fans or everyone, but like it's like a dream, you know, to have a team of kids that, you know, just grew up and fulfilled the potential and, you know, chasing doubles and trebles every single season. And that's what annoys me thinking back to O'Leary, because like we had it again, and the way they handled that was, I mean, I know we had injuries and stuff, and maybe they all wouldn't have gone on to achieve what the Revie lads did, but yeah, we just threw that away, didn't we?
Yeah, talking about the contrast between back then and now, one of my gripes, and I woke up on Saturday morning after the QPR game in such a stinking mood and thinking, I hate football. I hate everything it stands for. One of the points I kind of reflected on was how it's changed, in that now there's this perpetual anxiety around the finances of football, and if you don't go up, it's Armageddon, financial Armageddon. You got to sell everybody just to stay afloat and keep chasing that, you know, the Premier League dollar and all that. But I remember even going back to talking about when we were kids, football just sort of existed, and I know it got more pronounced and more stretched out between the Premier League and whatever the next one down is or was back then, Championship as it is now, Tier 2. But going back to like the 80s. Football just existed because the gap between top division and second division wasn't that great. And like we could afford to bring Gordon Strachan in, for example, and pay him an absolute fortune relative to the finances of football overall. He was on like £5,000 a week, which was huge at the time. And going back even further to this sort of Revie team, it was sort of non-existent, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You didn't need to be in the top division in order to be considered to be at the top of the tree. You could just play for a team for a number of years.
And it's hard to imagine anyone being able to build a team like this anymore, because we see Archie Gray and Somerville and people like that in the team, really good young players, and instantly your thought is like, I'm enjoying them this season. If we don't go up, someone will probably come in for them, and you don't get to ever build anything, do you? Whereas, you know, if you go back to, you pull that Revie team forward to the modern era, Arsenal have picked up Bremner for 40 million quid when he was 19 because he's come in and played well for a season. You'd be like, oh, okay, well that's that bit over with.
Yeah, and that's the reality of football.
And
it's
very hard to ever build anything anymore, isn't it? As a result of that, because you just get that thing of, well, these players are passing through, and maybe we'll get to enjoy them for a few years, but ultimately, if someone comes in with like 80 million quid for one of them, they're gone, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Even Leverkusen, like their team's going to get picked apart, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you see, you know, with teams down the years, like Mourinho's Porto team, for example, and there'll be loads of others where they would have, in a different era, they'd have gone on and maybe won multiple European Cups, changed the whole landscape of the club. And it's just so dull now, isn't it? Like everyone just funnels up to those top 4 or 5 clubs.
It's the money, isn't it? Just everything gravitates towards the money, which has actually been your argument towards the closeout of this season for why Leeds might go up, just because money tends to win out. But it also sometimes doesn't, does it? But
the one time I don't want it. The one time I actually want it to.
Yeah. But it was obviously not only a young squad, but a very cheap squad as well. That's another point to touch on. It was assembled through just a bunch of kids and the academy and recruitment and a young teenage boy coming down from Scotland in the form of like Billy Bremner, for example, because he got homesick and wanted to go home.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, to be fair, they did spend a bit of money at first. So like bringing Bobby Collins in from Everton was a big signing, and Alan Peacock was an England international. They signed him when they were in the second division. But it's funny, you know, for the first 5 or 6 years of through the book, once they've got promoted, every summer they don't sign anyone. They never sign anyone. They just, you know, promote Madeley and Lorimer, and then Gray comes through, and you know they've just suddenly then got a squad of 18 top young players. Just phenomenal, really. And it's interesting as well, drawing comparisons to today, because for a few years before they won the league, they didn't have a striker, and people were getting annoyed at Revie for not buying a striker. So just the same as like we had with Bielsa, and yeah, he ended up buying Mick Jones. But you know, there's a great quote in there from Revie where he says, you know, if I went out buying players left, right, and centre every time the young players showed weakness, like what effect's that going to have on the young players? You know, I must trust my own judgment. I think they're going to put us on the map. And yeah, look what happened. It's amazing.
He was right, wasn't he?
I'd say so.
He got a lot more right than he got wrong, didn't he? Well, actually, there's an interesting. I guess it's. Have you got to dance on a pinhead with some of this stuff as well? Like the controversies that surrounded Revie at the time. How have you pitched that in the book, and how do you handle that, and how do you research that as well? Because it's tough, isn't it? Because you've kind of got to put your prejudices aside, and let's face it, everything we do, like us as a show, I'm sure you as a show, it's all built around our stupid tribalism, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, in terms of the bribery allegations, I've not mentioned it.
Right.
I think it's
Seems
a load
fair.
of bollocks.
Yeah.
So I'm not even contaminating it with that stuff because I just pay it no interest. I've had on good authority that it's a load of nonsense, so I'm sticking with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like to think the interesting thing as well about the book is that, you know, people can form their own opinions on like some of the controversies. So, like, for example, you know, for me, the AC Milan match, the Cup Winners' Cup 1973, I mean, a lot of people have said that, you know, that was fixed. Like Paul Reaney, you know, he's absolutely convinced it was fixed. We almost know that it was fixed,
Yeah.
but a lot of those, I don't think that match was as bad as the 1975 final, for example. And there's other ones as well, like there was a semi-final against Chelsea, FA Cup, and Lorimer scores, and then the referee disallows it and makes us take the free kick again because he's not blown the whistle yet. And so there's a whole load of controversy around that. But I mean, you know, we got given the free kick for just a little tug on Hunter. If he was bribed, like, would he have given that free kick? So I don't know. I think people can make their own opinions about certain things, and I try not to be too biased. I point out the times where Leeds, you know, obviously benefit from controversial decisions as well, because yeah, those you know, the referees weren't perfect like they're not now.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, the 73 Cup Winners' Cup final in Greece, and my last holiday, so it would have been summer of 2022, I flew into Thessaloniki, Salonika as it was back then, and I felt like that, it immediately got my hackles up just being there, thinking this is where the injustice happened. But chatting to my dad about that, and I should get him on at some point and talk to him about it, because he was there with his mates and
Left at half time.
no, he used to sit through it all.
Did he? Oh,
Yeah,
good.
but back then, I think it's the fact that he used to sit through all that back then is why he wants to leave now early. And it goes back to what we were saying actually of how you know, draw comparisons between then and now. But he's told me some funny anecdotes just about, again, it's, I suppose, one of the true pieces of enjoyment you get out of football these days. It's the experiences with the people around you and your mates as much as anything else, isn't it? Like, players come, players go, managers come, managers go. But it's the memories you create in watching it all at the same time. And I listen to these stories of these young lads just roaming around the country, but also around Europe at different times as well. And they were in a hotel, I think, my dad was saying, and they were all checking out to get either the ferry back or whatever they were doing, or the flight back. And one lad, for reasons best known to himself, tried to steal a big bloody Greek urn or vase out of the hotel reception. Just one of those stupid moments where you go, I'm going to do something stupid now. Got picked up for it, and I think the police were called. So he ran off, but left his passport behind the hotel reception, so he couldn't get home. And he basically hitchhiked his way from Greece back to Leeds or wherever they were. And it took him about 2 or 3 weeks. He just showed up one day. It's like, I've made it, lads. Just hitchhiked all the way. Imagine trying to do that now.
And how did you get? Did you not need a passport at that point to get?
Just somehow managed to duck it. I don't know. I do not know to this day. That's why I suppose I should speak to my dad and find out.
I thought the story was going to be, and then he lived in Greece for the rest of his life. Still there now.
It just took him about 2 weeks to get back. And obviously, there's no mobile phones. You can't get in touch with people. He just hitchhiked his way back across. And it's a long bloody way.
It is a hell of a way
from Greece back to here, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, what an entertaining story. Imagine if you could put that in a book. You know, tell those sorts of stories about these lads going up and down the country in like transit vans and things like that before the motorways existed. But yeah, so other stuff in the book, the Clough rivalry is one of the things that you touch on, and him getting the job after Revie. So where does he feature in terms of that, and at what point does the book end? You know, spoiler alert and all that.
Yeah, so the book ends 1975 European Cup final, but I sort of go through 74, 75 quite quickly. So the book is really the 10 seasons, the decade of dominance. So Revie had 10 seasons in the first division, then he left, and then Clough gets the job. So basically cover that, you know, obviously to close the Revie story, and then cover the 2 semi-finals with Barca and then the European Cup final. But yeah, it's interesting with Clough because we played Derby. The first time Clough meets Revie, we play Derby. It's like a double header. We play them in the FA Cup and then two-legged League Cup semi-final within a few weeks. So 3 games. And like Clough is massively respectful of Revie and he's saying how, Leeds are a perfect example of what he wants his Derby team to become. And then as we go down the years, he gets more bitter, jealous or whatever. And it's just so toxic. And you can't believe, looking back and reading some of the stories in there about what Clough was coming out with, the disrespect of Norman Hunter especially, calling Peter Lorimer a cheat and, all sorts of stuff. And then, he's basically like, he's the baddie, and to give him the job, it was almost like siding with him. It was almost like slapping Don in the face. How can you possibly basically say, oh, maybe Clough was right all along. Here you go. Have the keys to the kingdom. Just unbelievable. So, yeah, obviously the players were, absolutely furious and the fans as well. I mean, I can't imagine what we would have been like. Imagine what Twitter would have been like if it was around back then.
It's absolutely furious, wasn't it? The whole thing.
I'm trying to think of a modern equivalent. It's kind of hard to think there's any, I suppose, because our position in the football world has been so different in the past couple of decades. But yeah, I suppose it'd be like sticking Alex Ferguson in charge of like Leeds in the 90s or something, wouldn't it? After everything that had gone on there. Yeah,
but I suppose Ferguson in the end had the record, didn't he, to back it up? So there would have been a certain amount of, okay, well, he's sort of been there, seen it, done it. You have to sort of suck it up, even though it tastes awful, that kind of thing.
I suppose we did have Dennis Wise put in charge, someone who was not even vaguely qualified for the job and had some previous.
Well, I was going to say, just thinking specifically about what it was that Clough said when he came in, chuck all your medals in the bin and all that sort of stuff, just drew my mind to that clip that's emerged over the weekend of John Terry describing on some sort of podcast about when Andreas Villas-Boas came in.
It's coming up in propaganda, is that
clip? Oh, is it? Super. When he came into the Chelsea job and he sat some of the senior first teamers in economy on a flight over to the States or wherever it was, and some of the youth team players in first class. And John Terry basically, spoiler alert again, says, look, this plane ain't going anywhere. I mean, I don't know what he would have done, actually, to stop the plane taking off, but that's an interesting theoretical question. But what he said was, if they don't move back here and we sit up there, this ain't happening. And he undermined him from day one. And I can almost see that is Villas-Boas there trying to stamp his authority, his personality on the club, and was Clough trying to do something similar? But it was just really ill thought out. Whereas actually, I'd have put John Terry in you could have put him
in the hold.
In the hold, yeah, in handcuffs. See if he makes it. If he dies, he dies. But what was he up to, Clough? But I mean, we'll never know, will we? But I know like the Damned United stuff has exploded, but it's very, very strange.
It makes me almost feel like it was sabotage. Like if you can't beat them, join them, and ruin them, and then go off and win the European Cup with someone else. I mean, that's basically what he did. Like, how could he expect to succeed? I really don't know. It was absolutely bizarre. Who knows? But one win. He lasted like 8 games, and got him out. But he'd made an absolute fortune. Just horrendous.
And another thing you've pulled out of the book is how strong that era was overall. And again, just to draw a modern comparison, you see the way that football is stratifying now, particularly at the top end of the Premier League, and it's oil-rich, gas-rich nation states that have been at the top of the pile in English football now for a couple of decades. It probably started properly, didn't it, I suppose, with Abramovich in 2003 at Chelsea, and how hard it is to break into that versus what this was like back then. And everyone was good, but it goes back to what we were saying before about football. Actually, the gap between the top and the bottom was so much smaller. Like I said, those top 2 divisions for many years were inseparable, and you could sort of yo-yo between them without much consequence and still keep your players.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, I mean, it's phenomenal looking back. I mean, in 1966, obviously England won the World Cup. But you go through every single big club and there's people with statues outside the ground. You got Man U with, Best, Charlton and Law and Matt Busby. And then, Bill Shankly, basically, his whole time coincided with Revie's, basically. Arsenal had Bertie Mee, they won the double. City, Newcastle, it's the last time they won European trophies. Well, not anymore, obviously, but when I started writing it was. And it's like 12 clubs had like golden eras between 65 and 75, but Leeds towered over the rest of them. Liverpool Bill Shankly finished above Revie 3 times. yeah, Bill Shankly is in all the conversations for greatest ever manager, and Revie isn't, even though, he won more than him, in those 10 years where, they both retired together, he left Liverpool when Revie left Leeds. And in that previous 10 years, Revie had won more, been to more finals, finished ahead of him, like I say, 7 times. Yeah, it's really annoying.
Leeds hating bastards.
Exactly.
To go back
at the FA.
To go back to Clough, what was your dad's opinion then on what should have happened at that point? Does he have a strong opinion that it should have been Giles or someone else that should have been brought in?
Yeah, I mean, he thinks it should have been Giles, but as I said, he's a bit different, my dad, and he actually really wanted Clough to be given the chance to turn it around. He thinks Clough would have been amazing. So my dad actually really liked Clough, despite all this rubbish, which isn't reflected in the book. By then, I'm using my own opinions. So, yeah, I don't mention that in the book. But, yeah, he actually thought he could do an amazing job. So,
well, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That he did go on to win the European Cup.
Yeah.
So it's hard not to look at that, particularly when you look at what happened in 1975 and say, well, his record afterwards it justified his approach. Not necessarily as it justified his approach to the Leeds players, but his footballing approach is what I mean. So there must possibly be that little, pang of regret or a part of what if. But he like you say, the Leeds board, with the way that it was framed, just made it completely impossible. And his approach to it probably made it impossible as well. And completely toxic was the word that you used. But it always asks that bit of what if, doesn't it? Because you can only treat it as that standalone moment in time. It's never the stuff that went before or afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. But that's the thing as well. There's certain managers do great at one club and terrible at another. And I don't know. I think Clough's thing was, bringing the underdog up. It's a very different thing going to Leeds at the time, who were, biggest club in the country. And, having to reshape that club and rebuild the team. Very big job, innit? Very different job to just building something from scratch. And at the end of the day, Forest were a flash in the pan. I mean, they won 2 European Cups, but after that, they did nothing, did they?
No. Do you feel like you've learned anything new in the process of writing this? Has something kind of jumped out to you where you've either learned something about yourself or your dad or just Leeds United as a whole?
I think mainly Leeds United as a whole and that team, basically that team. I sort of knew that they were amazing. But it's until you get into the detail of it and example like playing Ferencvaros in the first Fairs Cup final and you see, they beat them 1-0 on aggregate, fantastic. But like Ferencvaros were an amazing team. Like when you dig into it, Bill Shankly and Busby, they'd both lost to Ferencvaros. They both said that they were the best team in Europe they'd ever faced. And Leeds beat them with a bunch of kids, in front of 75,000 fans in Hungary, and they held out to a 0-0 draw. And yeah, it's like when you get into the detail of it, you really appreciate how amazing that they were. Obviously, they should have won more. At the end of the day, it was fixture congestion, and people sort of know that. But yeah, when you go through it and you see what they actually did, and how they responded to certain situations, my admiration for them is off the chart. I honestly feel they're the best team of all time. I really do.
Yeah, it sounds like you've enjoyed it as well, the process of doing it and uncovering all this stuff and learning something yourself along the way.
I loved it, yeah. Writing that book was, a different class because, my previous books, obviously, I'm basically just, putting down my memories and stuff. But this was, bit of a journey. It was felt like running a marathon. I started it and I didn't know how far through I'd get. I'm getting my dad's memories and I'm trying to, write match by match and sort of get through to 1970, 71, and I'm thinking, this is going all right. I might just pull this off. Got to the end and I was just pretty exhausted. So I think I need a break from writing now. Won't be a book for a few years, I don't think.
How long does it take when you, from sitting down and going, I'm going to do this, to...
It was, I think it was about 18 months, something like that. So, I mean, it took me probably about 4 or 5 months to actually get the bones of it down. And then it's going back over it and sort of researching deeper and then rereads and edits and stuff.
And how do you work best when you're doing it then? Do you have to go take yourself off somewhere, cabin in the woods style stuff? I'm just living my own dreams there.
Yeah, I wish. It's probably mostly sat on my floor with my, he was a toddler asleep in the bed at 5 a.m. and I'm burrowing away on my laptop, hoping he's not going to wake up until I have to start work. I sort of just do it because I'm a bad sleeper, so I get my extra hours in that way.
Imagine that. Do you know, it's funny talking about sleep. The first time I've slept well in months, like when truly well, was off the back of losing the QPR on Friday night. I went to bed and I slept for about 9 hours solid, and woke up on Saturday morning.
Was it the peace of knowing you had nothing to look forward to?
Do you know what it was? It was acceptance. Yeah, acceptance. Thinking we've absolutely blown this, and now I can rest properly.
And how did you sleep after that 3-3?
It's gone back the other way. It genuinely has, because we've just got that little glimmer of hope, something just to cling on to. And I think that's, I mean, you talk about like the tiredness of getting to the end of the book. That's how I feel about Leeds this season. I'm just tired now. It's worn me down. 46 games is a lot. It's a lot of football.
I think you guys hit the nail on the head when you said, like, it would have been worse if we'd have lost 1-0. Like 4-0, it almost becomes comical, doesn't it? It's like Leeds have done it again. Like 4-0, what the hell?
Yeah, we've not capitulated properly all season, have we? Really, apart from like Southampton away when it was 3-0 at one point, and even then we started to claw it back.
Yeah, and it was early in the season as well. It was still all taking shape at that point, wasn't it? So it was understandable, I suppose, then.
But it's good that we saved the full capitulation for the most crucial moment in the season.
It's great. Yeah, I've loved it. Absolutely loved it.
And yet, the dream is still not fully dead, which is, I suppose, riding that wave and riding that roller coaster is why we're all here, isn't it? And why we do all this. How do you find things from a podcasting point of view? Have you enjoyed it this season, and just generally?
Generally, I like it. It's difficult, isn't it? I often find it hard to strike there is no balance to strike. Like, we all just talk honestly, don't we? But like, I'm very aware that sometimes, I don't know, you don't want to be too negative, do you? But at the end of the day, like, you just say it how it is. Like, that's what we're here for, you know. Just have to say what you think, and if people think it's harsh, then too bad. But thankfully this season it's been basically a breeze. We've won every week until
I wonder if maybe that's what's caught them on the hop a little bit, that it has been so easy for most of it. They've not struggled that much, have they? And I wonder if that's what caught Southampton out a bit in the end when they went on that massive run, and then suddenly they faced a bit of difficulty. The same with Ipswich and Leicester. Maybe everybody, not Ipswich so much, because they're kind of riding the crest of an emotional wave, aren't they? But Leicester had it as such a breeze all season. Then it started to go, they wobbled and it went a little bit wrong for them. And they're like, oh shit, we've actually kind of got to switch on to this. And then they recover because they've got loads of expensive players and stuff.
But as we know, falling at the final hurdle is kind of a Leeds United hallmark, isn't it? As this book no doubt covers in some detail, I'm sure.
Indeed, yeah, pretty much every season. Even when we win stuff, there's heartbreak after it or before it. So, yeah, we don't really get to enjoy much as Leeds fans ever.
What do you think the lasting legacy of this team should be? Because we've seen, I guess, over almost starting with the Bremner statue, increasingly like more bits of Ellen Road have almost become dedicated to this. There's now the Revie statue, there's the Norman Hunter stand, the Jack Charlton stand. It's kind of, we're almost running out of bits to name after people now, but it doesn't feel like there's quite enough about it still, in a weird way.
Yeah, I think we need a museum. I know Bates first talked about it, but like, there needs to be something dedicated to our history, full stop. Yeah, I don't know what you do. To be honest, like, I don't know. I feel like the Revie stand, I think you guys said it, or Moscow probably said it on one of the podcasts, like, that's probably enough. Or like, I'd love to have like a statue of all of them doing the wave, something like that, because it's very difficult. There's so many of them that deserve a stand named after them. Like, I don't know what can you possibly do.
It's something to pull it all together, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think, rather than just having these disparate parts, like the odd statue here and this thing. It's something to mark all that team. Maybe a physical location, however it manifests itself, whether it is that it's the wave to all corners, which I think would make an outstanding statue. Probably expensive, 11 figures.
I'll tell you what would be good. So, like, in the Revie stand in the bar, you have like pictures of the team on the walls. So when they redo that stand, like, and it's actually nice inside, you could do something quite special. With shirts, encased on the wall, and all sorts of different, basically all the mementos that exist, bring it all together and make it something actually.
Yeah, it's like the
really
Revie stand becomes the place around which all that kind of revolves. Yeah, that's a nice idea. That, yeah, and I guess if they do the rebuild, it's the chance to do that properly, isn't it? Which is something we've never done. Because one of the things about Ellen Road, and I often think is, I love Ellen Road, and I'm the same as you. Is like, I kind of never want it to change. I want it to stay the same forever. But I think that's probably just related to like seeing it like that as a kid. and it's wanting to preserve your own childhood and all that sort of stuff. But the thing that persuaded me that it's time to redevelop it was that when we had Eddie Gray on, when they were drilling into Phil's head, and Eddie Gray came on as the Phil Hayes show, as it was then for The Athletic, and he just said, nah, time never stands still, knock it down, put something good there. And I was like, well, if Eddie Gray can say that, then I believe it. And it made me think that I do wonder sometimes if Ellen Road, because, the various stands, like, so for example, West Stand is John Charles. It represents John Charles. I mean, it was rebuilt with the funds used from selling him after the fire. North and South, both Revie era stands. East Stand, Wilco era stand, built at the time when we won the league. You've got these kind of physical monuments to all these different eras there. And I wonder if we kind of need to not escape it a little bit, but you look at what Howard Wilkinson did when he came in and took all the pictures down and said, we need to create our own little bit of history. Then we'll put these pictures back up. I feel a little bit like that about Ellen Road, that we need to do something new with it.
Yeah.
Just create a sense of renewal. But I also don't want it to change either.
I was like you, and then now I'm desperate for them to do it. I just feel like they should crack on with it. The 49ers, they're talking again about, like, if we go up, we're going to crack on. Just crack on. Like, apparently they've got the money there. Invest. If you're serious about this being a long-term 10, 15, 20-year plan, like, Leeds' USP, Leeds' way of getting ahead isn't going to be like an algorithm on a transfer sheet. It's the fans. It's the getting that extra revenue in from the fan base. Getting 50,000 in. We could do it even in the Championship. Not every week, but yeah, build the stadium to something that the club, that's worthy of the club and our history. And straight away that gives us a huge advantage over teams like Brentford and these teams that we're trying to compete with by outsmarting them. Well, you don't need to, just build the ground and go from there.
Yeah, and we're saying this at a time when they're about to change the rules in the Premier League, aren't they, for being only able to spend what your revenue is, a certain. So it's going to be like a multiplier of your broadcast revenue, isn't it? Which is probably no use in the EFL, but you would imagine that the EFL might end up tweaking its rules to reflect what the Premier League does, because you can't have the gap getting even bigger and bigger. It needs to somehow be fixed, I think.
Although I think the rules will probably entrench the gap.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
I was going to say, no, I don't think anything's ever designed to actually limit it, is it? It's to the benefit of the people who are already at the top will be looking to just stay there. Is about the gist of it.
Well, on which note, we'll wrap it up there. Rocco, thanks for coming in. All the best with the book. Sons of Revie, Leeds United's Decade of Dominance, I can see from the spine. Available now. I think you've got to say all good bookshops.
Yep.
And Amazon as well. The big giant, the big giant warehouse off the motorway. All the best with it. Cheers for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
The Square Ball Podcast.